welcoming me into your homes, your cars, your offices, and we're going to be having our interactive conversation. I'm not going to say who our guest is. I know Mr. Miles has already told you, but because I want to do a little bit of housekeeping first, we'll start with our contact details, which SMS WhatsApp 071 425 9577, Facebook Kofifi FM 97.2, Twitter Kofifi FM _972, Instagram at Kofifi FM, and you can watch us on YouTube, which is Kofifi TV. I want to start today with reading, and please pay attention, those of you with young adults that might be looking at a career in policing. The city of Joburg has sent out a notice. The MMC for Public Safety, Sun, whom we've had on the show, the Joburg Metropolitan Police Department is searching for 1,500 men and women to undergo training. On successful completion of the training course, they will stand a chance to become Metro Police officers of the city. I'm searching for men and women who have the highest sense of justice and integrity to join JMPD to serve and protect the residents of Joburg. The recruitment is the Department of Public Safety's first step under the new administration to not only enhance visible policing, but also create jobs for men and women who might either be without employment or are searching for a meaningful way to contribute to society. With an additional 1,500 officers deployed in the city, we are certain that visible policing will be more tangible and effective in curbing crime. Applicants must be, please take note of these are the qualifying criteria: a South African citizen residing in the jurisdiction of Johannesburg, between the ages of 18 to 35 years, in possession of a valid senior certificate, grade 12 or NQF level 4 equivalent, proficient in English, in possession of a valid Code B manual transmission driver's license, physically and mentally fit, and be able to subject oneself to successfully complete a pre-training fitness test. Cleared of and have no criminal record and or civil judgment relating to fraud and or corruption, and be prepared to carry a firearm and perform duties in uniform. We look forward to the brave men and women in the city answering this call of honor and becoming a member of the elite enforcement of the city. And this is from MMC Sun for Public Safety. Please get your applications going. Don't say you didn't know. On another note, we have to talk about this. We have to talk about the irresponsible statement that was made by the new Minister of Finance's advisor. He was addressing some grouping in the Devonshire Hotel in Johannesburg last week. And in it, he spoke his usual nationalize everything. Government must own everything. Basically, government must be a monopoly. And he was talking about radical economic transformation. But in the light of the radical economic transformation, and this is it's bugging me that people are not up in arms about the statement that he made. Firstly, he says it's going to be difficult. We will end up like Venezuela and Zimbabwe. So my question is, if you know that's how we are going to be, why do it? According to him, at the end of that period, we'll rise like a phoenix again. So I don't understand how you must destroy something for that to happen. And if there was a solution, now Zimbabwe and Venezuela are in the situation they are in because they took on the same policies he's talking about and haven't been able to get out of that situation. So what magic formula does he have that they don't have? And they've been in this situation for almost 15, 20 years. But most importantly, the thing that actually bugged me the most was he had the audacity to stand there and say that if we don't want to accept radical economic transformation, they must take up arms. Now, this is a man employed by the state as an advisor to the Minister of Finance. So when he says they must take up arms, is he saying the government is going to declare war on us citizens because we don't want to accept what they are saying? Is it not our right to reject something if we believe it's going to harm us? That's a rhetorical question. And I leave it to you to ponder, and I leave it to you to also start complaining. We don't complain enough, I think. And I don't mean complaining to your neighbor. And I don't mean standing over the fence. But I mean, the loudest noises in social media fora are those that support these harebrained ideas. People who actually understand the implications of these harebrained ideas tend not to. Remember last week we had the MMC for finance from the city of Joburg, MMC, the Dr. Dagada, and he had written an article, and he said, because, when your economy collapses, like Zimbabwe and Venezuela's has, because of stupid policies like these, it's not the ruling class that suffers. So when this guy says things will be bad and we must be brave, he's not talking about himself. He's talking about you and I. Because the ruling class is shielded from all of this. Because they make sure they pay themselves, and of course they plunder and loot. So start speaking. There's never a stupid question. There's never a stupid argument. You are entitled to your point of view. But my thing is, this guy saying that the state is going to take up arms against its own citizens. And that, for me, is horror. And on that note, we are going to turn to something beautiful. It's sad, but beautiful. But before we go to it, I want to read you a poem, and it'll fit in with all of this. Peggy, if you are listening, this is for you too. Still I Rise by Maya Angelou. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still, like dust, I'll rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? 'Cause I walk like I've got oil wells pumping in my living room? Just like moons and like suns, with the certainty of tides, just like hope springing high, still I'll rise. Do you want to see me broken? Bowed head and lowered eyes, shoulders falling down like teardrops, weakened by my soulful cries. Does my haughtiness offend you? Don't you take it awful hard, 'cause I laugh like I've got gold mines digging in my own backyard. You may shoot me with your words, you may cut me with your eyes, you may kill me with your hatefulness, but still, like air, I'll rise. Does my sexiness upset you? Does it come as a surprise that I dance like I've got diamonds at the meeting of my thighs? Out of the huts of history's shame, I rise. Up from a past that's rooted in pain, I rise. I'm a black ocean leaping and wide. Welling and swelling, I bear in the tide. Leaving behind nights of terror and fear, I rise. Into a daybreak that's wondrously clear, I rise. Bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave, I am the dream and the hope of the slave. I rise, I rise, I rise. Simon Bainders, thank you very much. I went to look for this poem after I read your book, and the book is A Handful of Earth. Kofifi listeners, when I got to the last 1.5 pages of this book, pardon me if I cry, I had tears in my eyes. It's a beautiful book. Congratulations.
Thank you, Rosemary. And, good afternoon. Good afternoon to all the listeners.
When I was reading it, I was asking myself, is this fiction or not? Or is there a mixture of a narrative of your family and using a poetic license added other components? Kofifi listeners, the book is called A Handful of Earth. Simon Bainders, many of you might know him as an actor, and we're going to talk about that. For me today, what's more important is Simon Bainders, the author, because it's a seminal work. It's simple, but it's complex. Its simplicity is in its complexity. You are telling the history of the dispossession and reaffirmation of colored people and their history through a narrative of a family.
That is right.
What inspired your book? Because this has not been told before. We hear the histories of other people. Colored people have not written their story yet. And for me, you are writing the story now.
Okay, Rosemary, I think it was about 20 years ago that some people asked me how did apartheid hurt me? And I said, no, man, I survived apartheid, don't worry. And then I started telling the story, they insisted. And then before I could finish, I cried. And there were men all around me, white, Indian, black, colored. And then I went home and I decided to make notes about the story. And then in 1998, Royston Stoffels, the other, one of the actors, they had the Heritage Festival in Cape Town. And at the point I was living in Cape Town, and he asked me, listen, don't you want to come and do a one-man play at this festival? And I said, I don't have a play, but I've got notes for a play. And then I decided to write this as a one-man play. And then my daughter-in-law said, Daddy, the play is finished now, you need to write a book. And I said, no, I've never written a book before. But then I started, and it took quite some time. It took 4 years with sending it in and out and not getting good remarks and all that stuff. And then eventually persevering and getting it done.
Well, you're being published by probably the most reputable publishing company, Penguin. You know, when I saw that, I said, and that was before I'd opened the first page, I said, oh, okay. Clearly, there's something worth printing then.
Yeah, it was not that easy. Initially, I wrote the story in Afrikaans. So the book came out in 2014 as the sideboard. Now, the sideboard, some of your listeners might know, that's the thing that stands in Grandma's lounge.
With the dishes that don't get used.
Yeah. All those fancy china and stuff. And then Penguin was interested in doing the translation. And at the time when they said, okay, they would love to publish the book, but they need money for the translation, I said, no, it's already been translated. I went to, because I'm a very hands-on person, I cannot wait. And so the University of Stellenbosch referred me to Belinda Jackson. I said I specifically would like a Western Cape colored person to do the translation, because I believe there's metaphor and stuff that they would understand.
There's certain nuances
Yes.
that somebody else wouldn't have been able to pick up.
That is right.
Or understand, or internalize and
Exactly.
express.
Yeah. So when I write, because it's, as you would have experienced, there's a lot of emotion in the story, and somebody must pick up on that emotion. Other people can feel it's soppy, or it's this, or it's that, but it is there.
No, I didn't think it was soppy, because it's a story about a family. It's the evolution of this family from the 1800s. and I was writing notes. I was going back to my days of studying literature, and and it was good for the brain because sometimes we forget. And I picked first of all. Before we actually go into the book, I want to read something that a poem, an extract from a poem that you wrote by S.V. Peterson, and it's the extract. And in what depths, with stench imbued, in rotten slime besmirched, did I not languish there, that you, O Lord, from me should part, not cleanse me from this mire? And I think it's so important that Kofifi listeners know that their people were writing work like this long ago. Long ago, in the 60s. And there's a tradition of writing, of poetry, of prose. And the beauty of it is that here you have your two main characters, which is Abraham and Stella, who become the patriarch and the matriarch, and the story is told through them. Did these characters exist?
Yeah, Abram was under another name, actually, my father. My
Ah.
father was, he never went to school because he was living in near Uniondale, there in the Long Kloof, where Phila se kind comes from.
Uh-huh.
And he,
That's Adam Small, huh?
no,
No,
Dalian Mathieu.
yes.
Anyway, then he married my mother. So, and she was a teacher.
So your mom would be Stella.
My mom would be Stella.
Uh-huh.
And my mother taught my father to sign his name. That's the only thing
with
he
the
could
fancy
ever
line
write. With the fancy line. And it was the only thing my father could ever write.
Uh-huh.
So they carry the main story, and some of the names there, like George and Johnny and Albert, they actually my brothers.
Okay.
And Sylvia. And there was a baby that almost died in the fire when he was small.
Yes, the
and
one that was saved
and
by Karen.
That was in real life. That was me.
Oh,
So it is the main story is a family
the
story.
baby is Simon.
Yes,
In the book.
that's right.
Yes.
And so the main story is carried by this family, but there are other stories in, like
Yes.
Joseph, the Boyson guy. He lived there. There were, I think, stories that people don't know. Everybody spoke about a year ago about the Randall Wickham story of this colored, that guy that grew up as white. Now, before that, such a story was about the DeLow family. It's not their surname, their real surname, where it was in the book, in the sideboard, the original book, and where this man, the one was a teacher, he looked like an Indian from Chatsworth. You know, we are Briani, we got all sorts of colors. And his brother was fair with bluish eyes. And they, and the darker man was a teacher, he was school principal, and his brother was an electrician, but his brother could never get a wireman's license in the 60s because he was colored. So then he played white. He turned white because his wife was also fair and his children were fair. And then he got his wireman's license, and there's a argument between them where his brother then asked him, "What, Uncle Dan, what must my children call you now, Bas Dan?" So
it's funny, but it's sad.
Yeah. So there are a number of stories. Most of them were true. There's probably about 25% fiction in there, just to, to put the icing on the cake. And
No,
so on.
but that's what I was saying, because you started this as a play. After I read this, I said there's a film. I said there's a film in this book, because the colored story under apartheid hasn't been told.
No.
And what I and what you do with this book is you take the narrative of South Africa's apartheid history, and it's told through the eyes of your mom and dad, Abraham and Stella in this case. And you are able to identify all the historical things and events that happened without, sometimes people knock you over the head with the politics. I like the fact that you keep the humaneness, the fact that this is about human beings. It's not just about, you don't quote any laws and all of that. You talk about the day-to-day effects that these things had on people. But there's and I asked myself, I said, how did you manage to take such a long period of history and condense it into this? Because at the end of this, I understand everything that happened under apartheid.
Yeah, I think it's the only way I felt that I could have told the story, because things happen, and then people are happy for a few years, and then there's an intervention, and then people get replaced, or something happens that tears them apart, and then they build again. And I think the thing with Abram, there's always that idea of hope, that someday things will be better, and that is what we, as I think all black people or that people that are not white in South Africa, and even white people, believed in, that a day will come like 1994. The day has, of course, now disappeared, but it has 1994, 27th of April.
In ether.
Yeah, and the day has been captured or something. So there was always this idea of hope, and then also we must at some stage we'd probably look at the religion, the religious part of it, because people had to believe, that someday things will change. But I also needed to say that in 1939 people were poor. Everybody seemed to have been poor, but the Afrikaner were gearing himself to eventually take over the country, and then obviously it happened, and we lived quite fairly happily there. And then suddenly, after the Nationalist Party came in, they took away the beaches, and suddenly we couldn't go to the beach anymore.
But let's take it right back to Sarsveld and the Otanika Mountains. And I'm looking, I wrote pages down because I wanted to read extracts from here, and I can't find this. Because, listeners, this starts off about Simon's dad, who, as he said, never went to school, so couldn't write. Married a school teacher, his mom, who taught him how to sign his name. And he used to pick rooibos tea and lug it over the mountain on his shoulders. But they get moved from there, and they get moved to this place called the island. Right. Is this a real place, this island?
Yeah, the island was in George. If people go down on the Knysna way, the way between Oudtshoorn towards Knysna, and they turn left just after they pass the big NG Kerk, the big one with a clock, they turn left, then they would go to what used to be the island. There was a river that started in the mountains that goes right around the island, and that is why they called it the island.
Okay.
And so they were removed from Sarsveld, where they thought they would live forever, because Abram, part of this picking tea is money that they saved to buy the property that they were renting, and it was a big plot. They farmed there. And then they got evicted to the island because the Anglican Church bought this place for their members to go and live, because people didn't want to live in the township. The island was a little suburb. And then eventually they allowed white people. The only white person that actually lived there was Canon Swindell, the priest of the Anglican Church. And then they allowed white people in, as we always open our hearts. And eventually What broke them was the fact that they lost the land and the white people stayed.
But I wrote the page down. Maybe you'll be able to find it better. And when I look in this page, I can't find this thing that I want to read, where Koos
Yeah,
and your mom, or is it your yes,
grandma.
and your grandma end up in an argument, and she asserts the fact that she is a Khoi woman. If you could find that for me, I thought it was on page 50, because I wrote that as it being on page 50, and now I can't find it anymore, because I thought it was because we need to talk about the land issue as well, because this whole thing starts off with basically it's about Abraham, your dad's over his passion for the land and his love of the land, and the fact that he goes to war to fight in the Second World War. He's driven by this thing because there's this promise of land. I know you should be reading it, but this one I'll read because you see, this book isn't mine, so I couldn't write in it. Oh God, your language can be so descriptive. Big Koos looked like a cross between an angry bull and a stupid baboon.
I suppose he won't be called racist if I call him
When
a
he
baboon,
says,
because he's white.
land you will not get, and he's saying this to your grandmother, land you will not get, I'm sure of it. Woodcutters and water carriers you will stay. Now, your grandmother responds, whose Bible? Yours or God's? Do you even understand that Bible? This land belonged to the Khoi, the Otanika, long before your people arrived here. The Khoi lived here, hunted here, farmed here, raised their children here. That is why we are here. And for a moment, Koos was taken aback, but then he thundered ahead. We have just as much right to be here. We brought new life to this country. We came to farm. We found gold here, damn it, Mina. So you can't say the white man was not good for this land. We fought 2 wars here, spilt our blood here. And where's that part, man, where she says, I am a Khoi woman? I can't find it. But anyway, it was that particular part that I wanted to read out. But it goes back to that now. There's all this talk about people claiming their land back. And the people whose land this actually is, your ancestors, your grandmother's people, the Khoi, their voice isn't being heard in this whole narrative that's going on.
Yeah, and that is sad. And I think we have to find a way to speak about the land before we cannot be dispossessed again. You know, we lost it in wars. I mean, the first wars.
First, you lost it to
exactly the first wars that were fought here in near Woodstock, and was it the Battle of Bloubergstrand, the Isaubra? Those were the Khoi fighting the colonialists, the people from Portuguese, mostly that came in.
And in KZN, they were fighting the Ngoonies.
That's right. So we must start there. But the president, in one flash moment of wisdom, said a few weeks ago that when we look at the land issue, we will have to look at the pre-colonial era.
But if you look at the pre-colonial era, the land belonged to the Khoi and nobody, the Khoi and the San, and nobody else.
Exactly.
So if he's going to look at that, it means that basically, as you say, the Khoi and the San own the land, and all these chiefs that are claiming land must just take a back seat. But he won't, because he's got a vested interest in it. But let's go back to the book. Why I want to go back to the book, there's certain words that come out in the book. They're not, but there's something I want to ask you as well, because I didn't know this history and I learned it in this. How much time did you spend on research? Because there's a lot of information as I say, it's an easy read, but there's these nuggets of information that come up that jerk one up, that I didn't know that. Like the Cape Corps. I thought the Cape Corps was something that was started by the apartheid government.
No, the Cape Corps was started before the First World War already. So the two big battles that the Cape Corps won against the Germans were the Battle of Square Hill and the Battle of Delville Wood.
I wanted to ask you that because I didn't know about that.
And then they have, and what still makes me unhappy is they have the Battle of Delville Wood where they commemorate it every year, but you don't see our people there.
Who commemorates it then?
It was on TV. Every year they have like a battle of, and people go there to France, to Delville Wood. But they never come around and say, listen, who, Ben Johnson that is mentioned there, for instance, whose family lives in Rosemary in George. Ben Johnson, can your great-great-grandchildren please come with us to France because you were one of the people who actually fought in the war. And remember, that was only the Cape Corps. And they said the Cape Corps was so brave.
You mean that victory, those two victories, because I had no clue about Square Hill and Delville Wood. And there you are talking about the Cape Corps. Was it fought exclusively by the Cape Corps, these two battles?
They were in support, but at a certain point in the wood, I think the other soldiers were probably tired, and then they sent in the Cape Corps for the last battle. It was either you win the battle or you die there. And these colored soldiers, they rushed in there with ordinary guns and bayonets against a German army which had machine guns, and they drove the Germans back, and they captured some of them. And that was one of the great battles that was fought in the First World War. But I was always fascinated with the wars. I read most of the books about the First World War, especially the Second World War.
When you went to the Second World War, and I was saying, and you were writing about Abyssinia, and I was saying, do people today actually know that Ethiopia was Abyssinia, and that Ethiopia is the only African country that was never colonized? And again, it's because the Cape Corps was there.
Yeah, they helped.
Basically, the Cape Corps prevented Ethiopia from being colonized by the Italians.
Well, they were part of it. There were other soldiers as well.
Yes, it was the Commonwealth soldiers. Because Querbus comes up there.
That's right. So, and that was... so these are important things that people must know. Also our people, because sometimes people say, okay, we don't have role models. Then they look at Stephen Delan and us actors and a couple of singers and they say that's my role model. And we have a rich history that the National Party didn't like to expose in the history books. Now we are rewriting the history books, and my fear is that we will be written out, or our stories or our history will be written out of the books again.
The coloured history is being written out of the history books. It is. Let's just put it out there. It is being written out of the history books, and the language and culture which emanates from the Khoi and the San. Like, there's certain words that you used, and I was like, I must ask him what that is. Like, you talk about, I don't know if I'm saying this correctly, but it's spelled Ghellie. Is it a Ghellie?
A Ghellie, yeah. Now, okay, that is a tin, like a 20 liters tin, that people would make fire in. And then but outside, because of the smoke, then when it becomes cold, then they put it in, they bring it into the house.
Okay.
And because George has got a lot of plantations, there's a lot of pine trees, and the pine cone, when it dries, it makes a wonderful coal.
And it smells beautifully when it burns, doesn't it?
So, But I would like to say something about Ethiopian research. I never, the research is probably the thing that I learned the most, how important it is. Because I remember where there is a scene where Abram and his brother sits there and speak to Abu Adamu, the guy
Yes,
from Abyssinia, and he talks, and then he tells them that about their fight with the Italians that started actually long before the Second World War, and then I wrote they were drinking beer, and then my editor wrote back to me in an email, what beer are they drinking? And I said, no, how the hell would I don't know what beer they were drinking in Ethiopia in 1941?
It didn't have a name at
No,
that time.
and then she said, no, your listeners want to know. So I had to research that beer, which is the most popular beer in that country at the time. I went and Googled and Wikipedia'd and spoke to some Ethiopians in Cape Town. And now you can read about the beer for about a page. The name is Stella beer, or Tella beer.
Yeah.
And how it tastes, and how do you get to that taste, how it is made, everything is down there. So it is interesting, because especially when a story is so close to you, you would say, okay, that day I went, after I left Kufifi FM, I saw this and that happening in the street. And then the reader don't know who's Kofifi FM if they're sitting in Britain reading a book. So that is what she said. Remember, your reader is not as informed as you, because you lived through the story.
Yes,
but they
yes,
haven't. So
yes.
things that you run over as unimportant is important to them.
Like, you talk about claylat. What is a claylat?
Okay, that is, it's normally from the quince tree. It bends. So they would put a piece of clay there at the bottom, and they will throw with it and see who throws the farthest. It's a little bit like David and Goliath, but it isn't a sling. You put it on the end of the sling, and then you whip it. And because it bends, and then it throws. And we would play with that to see who throws the furthest.
You see, for me, this is cultural. This is cultural knowledge that we lack. You know, often, and it's black African people that are most guilty of this, where they'll always say colored people don't have a culture. But the truth is, there is one. But it's not being passed on. And this is what I got out of this book. And there's certain things that we are guilty of because we've lost them. The storytelling. Like Abraham sitting there in the evenings and they tell stories, ghost stories. What do you say? And this is how culture is passed on.
Exactly.
How do we revive this?
By switching off the TV. Those people didn't have a television. They didn't have a radio, so they had to fill the time. And I think that is much more quality time than everybody sitting and watching the TV or fighting which channel you're going to. And I wanted to, especially for the young people, to understand there was a way of life.
Yes.
That people lived, and it was a quality way of life. It was a time when people trusted one another, when they had a handshake and no paper.
We're going to go to that about the degeneration of the culture of life, that basically the politics of the day foisted onto colored people. And maybe by listening to that, we'll be able to in some way try and alleviate the negative influences, because your book is leading up to that, in fact, because one dispossession after the other until you end up in a location, and then the problems that we have today. But we'll get to that part. You also manage somewhere in there's the betrayal of the colored people. They promised land, and what happens when they come back from the war?
Yeah, they got a bicycle and a coat. And we always used to laugh about that. Some older people will still remember the bicycle and the coat that the soldiers got.
And the role of your church, in your case, it was the Anglican Church, and often the role of the churches in protecting people against apartheid legislation in terms of the deprivation of education and stuff like that. You know, it comes out in your book. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, and I think it started it started hundreds of years ago with the Khoi people and also with the slavery. That is why we have Genadendal and Elim and these places, and where the Moravian church and other churches, they made, when the slaves, for instance, were set free, they said, listen, if you want to start a family and live a family life and not go and steal and things, because what must you do? You've been a slave. Come and live in Genadendal or come and live in Piniel or whatever.
So Genadendal was actually a place for freed slaves.
Yeah, it was initially started for the Khoi people around there, but when the slaves were freed, they were offered, please come and stay here. We'll help you build a house and raise a family, but you must join the church. That was the one thing, that you have to join the church. And that is why places like Genadendal up till today still don't have a liquor store.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Because that was the one, you come out of that thing. You come out of the Doppie-stelsel, where you were paid with alcohol. So come and live here, but we don't want your alcoholic system and syndromes and stuff. We want you and your family. Come and build a family. And the churches were important, and that is.
And education?
Education.
Often it was only the churches that were prepared to teach people that were not white.
Yeah, we are doing busy with Fatima and myself and some other people. We're on RSG with a story that also plays off in the George Neisner area. And then they asked, the white actors asked about this, why is it the EK Church? And this the Engelse Kerk, the EC Church is the Anglican school. So they asked, why is it the EK school? And I said, Hibernia school that is mentioned there is today the Dutch Reformed school. It was started by the church, and then they got a grant from the department. And so they were not all state. There were very few state schools at the time. And it was the church schools. And that is why there was no argument over having an assembly where you opened the Bible in
and
the morning, or you prayed, and children learned to pray, and you were singing hymns in the school. There was no issue because it was a church school. Now we come with the human rights culture and the state schools, and suddenly those things disappear. And look what
but
is
that's because
happening
there's so
now.
many religions.
Yeah, but I think nobody tries to accommodate all of them. The easiest one is to throw them out, which I think is wrong.
Well, anyway, that's a discussion for another day. I mean, I went to Catholic schools my entire life. So that's the way I was socialized as well. And that's where I acknowledge the role of the church in the quality of education that was given to children that were not white. And in fact, I think the education we got there was superior to the one that white kids were getting.
Very good. Yeah.
The other thing, you know, it moves, and it moves from the Second World War, and you even managed to work the Ossewa Brandwag into it. And a lot of young people don't know what the Ossewa Brandwag was.
A lot of adults didn't know until Steve Hofmeyer mentioned it about a year ago.
Why did he feel?
He mentioned the Ossewa Brandwag. And, you know, at the time, after 1948, we whispered the Ossewa Brandwag. Now, the Ossewa Brandwag were a military wing, if you
of
can
the
say
National
that.
Party.
The National Party of people who did not, they boycotted before they became the power. They boycotted the Second World War. They didn't want to go. And so they were there, and I had to, because there was a branch of the Ossewa Brandwag in Georgia, and they did burn down the
school.
We suspect they burned down the school, but they definitely burned down the bioscope.
Oh.
And because the bioscope was not segregated. And everybody went in to sit there in the bioscope. And then when they had to rebuild it, they had to build it with a upstairs division for the but not non-whites, and a lower division for the whites. So yeah, those were the stuff that people went through.
Then you also, and then you mentioned Sonny Leon, and I'm like, is it Sonny Leon of Labour Party that he's talking about? I wasn't sure, because he gets mentioned on his own in the beginning, but eventually it comes up that it is Sonny Leon, the politician.
Yeah, see, a lot of people like Kearns and Sonny Leon, they went to fight in the war, and some of them were like officers or junior officers, sergeants or whatever. And when they came back, they formed the BCESL, the British Christians Ex-Servicemen's Legion. And my mother was secretary of the Southern Cape branch of that. And they eventually they were the only voice that could speak to politics, because in 1954 the coloureds were taken off the voters' roll. So they used that, and then came the teachers at the Teachers Professional Association and so on, and those were the only two political voices for the coloured people. So eventually Sonny Leon and his people they formed the Labour Party. Dr. Van der Ross and everybody started the thing.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that Dr. Van der Ross cut his political teeth in the Labour Party.
Yeah, and there were almost two Labour parties, if I can put it that way. There were the one of Sonny Leon that was part of the Coloured Representative Council. Then there was the Labour Party of Ellen Hendrikse, which is basically the same, but they were two eras. They became part of the tricameral parliament.
Yes.
And then it led to the UDF, because people felt we shouldn't do that. And so all these stories happened around Abram and his family, because even though you're not involved in politics, and that is what I think people must even at this time realize, and that is what civil society is now realizing, or coming out and saying, is that you live in a political environment, and it's going to influence you. If people don't do the right things, and we've got young status, and milk and bread goes up, it influences everybody, whether you are apolitical or not. It has and that is what I wanted to portray. There were always this political things.
Yes, no, the
around.
whole book, it's about the politics that are evolving and how they are affecting the family.
Just want to live a normal, common life.
All Abram wants is a piece of land where he can grow his crops. And Stella, your mom, the teacher, wants to raise, oh God, she had a lot of sons and only one daughter. So, but you also, in this, managed to work in the rebel rugby tours and the political stance that, as you say, people are not necessarily political, but they make political choices without it being political, but because they can see. But something's just not right here. If you could talk about that.
Yeah, I actually asked my mentor, listen, do I actually have to mention these things? And he said it gives authenticity to the whole story, because it happens in a certain era, and people can research that. If I say that this one died in the year the Republic was formed in 1961, you can go and check it out. And that is to me very important, and I think people must even now understand that political decisions that people make do have an influence on your life. A very interesting thing happened when I did the musical last year. It was on the sideboard, the musical, based on the Afrikaans book. And I wrote the story about Kobus, who goes to the war, and he has a big fight with his father, who ostracizes him and throws him out of the family because he wants to go and fight with the English, because they hated the English because of the concentration camps of the Anglo-Boer War. But then Kobus says to his father that I'm fighting on the side of justice, not on the side of the English.
Yes, that was very profound.
And when I didn't realize what I was writing at the time. When I took the manuscript or the text for the musical to Albert there in Cape Town, the director, and I gave it to him at Artscape. That was the weekend when al-Bashir was in the country. And people took the same decision. We are going with the one man. In that time, it was Hitler against the rest of the world. Now, other people, totally different people, 75 years later, takes the same decision. We are supporting the one man. We ignore the 300,000 people that he apparently have killed. And then the sideboard or the book asked me, what has changed?
Now, the sideboard, is the sideboard, the Afrikaans one,
that's right,
different to A Handful of Earth?
No. This is a translation of the,
okay,
of the
because
sideboard.
Although it's about, I mean, the centerpiece is the sideboard and the ending of the book. I won't tell you guys the ending because you've got to go and get this book, A Handful of Earth by Simon Brainders. Now, a lot of you, because I didn't realize time had flown so fast. Simon, we haven't spoken about you, the person. And I know you've got something you want to do there as well. If you can please, first, the thing you want to give our Kofifi listeners, if you could deal with that, and then if you could talk to us about Simon Brainders, the person.
Okay. All right. I would like to give away a book. Two books. One Afrikaans and one English. To Kofifi listeners that should, I think a question that they can probably answer is where is the story situated in, but they must say the province and the town. Okay? So we'll keep on talking about this beautiful place called George. And then I have on Thursday.
Which province is George in? Is it Eastern
I
Cape
don't
or
know.
Western Cape?
We will not tell the listeners that. They know. And then on Thursday and Saturday evening, I have the one-man play, A Handful of Earth, at the Crystal Church. And I would like to give away 2 tickets. Where's the Crystal Church? It is in Aeroton near Nazareth.
Okay.
They have got a little theatre there, which they gave to me.
Oh.
And these people who win the books, please, I have to come and collect it there. It starts at it's 19:30 on Thursday the 4th, coming Thursday and Saturday evening. And then also 2 tickets that I would love to give away. And the piece of furniture that is central.
The sideboard.
I don't know whether that's a piece of furniture, but if the listeners can SMS you or something and say what piece of furniture is central in the book, then they can get 2 tickets to either of the shows. They can choose the show.
All right.
Simon Brainders. I was born in George, there under the beautiful Outeniqua Mountain, grew up there. And, I was in matric when this eviction happened. And my father was in a mental institution because in the book, Abraham loses his mind, he loses everything.
With the eviction.
We lose him almost as a father. And so I didn't go. I studied afterwards. I went to work. I passed matric when I was just 17 years old.
So you did go and work at Coloured Affairs?
Yes.
When the rest of your family all became teachers?
I was the youngest. So then I said, no, I don't want to become a teacher. I want to become an engineer. But how do you become an engineer in the 60s when you're a coloured man and can't go to Stellenbosch?
Yeah, I wanted to talk about that but we don't have much time. I want to talk about the phenomenon of families where you had entire families to become professional. The only profession that seemed open to them was becoming a teacher.
Or a nurse. Yeah, that was the situation. And that is why I think the young people must make good choices. They've got so much to do, to choose to go and do. And I'm saddened by the fact that not enough of our people are entering UJ or the universities and go and study stuff. But then there's other things happening. There is a lady, I think she is a Kofifi listener, who passed at Westbury with 3 degrees in 2007 or 8, and she wanted to become a civil engineer. And she was coloured. And
I remember that story.
And everybody told her, why don't you become a teacher or a nurse or something? You're so good. And all her mother wanted of her, because she wanted to do civil engineering. And eventually she became a civil engineer.
Oh, congratulations
but
to
it was
you.
a fight. It
How
was
do
a
How do I
fight.
get on the show?
I will give you a number because I think it would be
Yes.
it would be great to come and because she comes from Westbury School,
Okay.
with
So
three distinctions.
But this is your family story tells us that. Here's your father, he was illiterate. And today his son is a published author. Well, besides being an actor and whatever else that you are, but you're a published author and you are the son of an illiterate person. So your circumstances, don't be bound by your
And
circumstances.
never define you. And there is a little thing that I write in the book about the little bird.
Yes.
Where Abram finds this bird who
Or
can't
the broken
fly
wing.
with a broken wing. And later on, I actually realized, there's so many of our people with broken wings.
Yes.
The whole of Menenberg and Westbury and places like that, Bonteheuwel, there are people who will never fly out. There are people, probably like myself, like Zane Mears, like Kim Engelbrecht from Isidingo. He used to be in Isidingo. Brayton Paulson, the rugby player, who flew out of those surroundings. But most of the people, unfortunately, have to stay there. They have to accept that
But
lifestyle.
they don't have
where
to.
you,
They don't have
No,
to.
they don't have to.
Exactly. And I think we I really wanted to say this because we've reached the end, but as you can see, I've got quite a few pages I had written out here, but 1 hour is not enough. I know this is a biblical statement, but it's in your book. And I just thought it was profound. And I thought, what better way to conclude A Handful of Earth by Simon Brainders than, I planted good trees, but the fruit they bear is bitter.
Thank you.
If you can say goodbye.
I would like to say goodbye. And that is because I think that is what Abram he understood. I was fascinated by the way the old people understood the Bible. And they lived the Bible and they took it so literally. And then also at the end he loves going to the sea. And he, in his own paraphrase of a script from Josiah, says, the sea is wonderful. A priest once said, let your righteousness be like the waves of the sea, because it keeps on rolling day and night. It never stops.
And on that note,
God
Coffee
bless
Free
you all.
listeners, we bid you adieu. Go out, get a copy of A Handful of Earth by Simon Brainders. Read the book. Pass it on to your children. Pass it on to your neighbor. Know the story of colored people and how they suffered under apartheid and how they were dispossessed by apartheid and how you can rise up against this. And on that, talk to you on Thursday. Thank you, Simon.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
For contagious laughter. Empowering conversations.
Let's make this the year in which we turn our lives around. Learn something new every day. Learn something new once a week. Learn something new once a month. Learn something new.
Entertaining nostalgia.
Didn't you just love that song? I'm so proud by Curtis Mayfield. I was just telling Camry that I feel so sorry